So what's with the national media picking Texas A&M to beat Auburn all of a sudden?
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zac Blackerby, and thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks to all the everydayers out there. And of course, you guys know Darrell Dapprich, Montgomery radio legend, the father and creator of the DAP, joining us as he does every single Friday. Darrell, we'll talk about Thorne, Peyton Thorne actually getting his first little slice of recognition. Does that mean anything? As well as what reasonable expectations are for the running back room when it comes to the market share of carries and production. But I've seen a trend over the last week or so with national media members starting to roll out their predictions. And there's two things to this. One, I'm shocked how many of them are picking Texas A&M to beat Auburn. And on the other side of it, though, they are picking Auburn to beat Oklahoma, which is nice. We'll talk about that in a second. But what do you think it is with this latest trend of this national media group loving Texas A&M? Every guy that I'm seeing with a microphone at the national level is picking Texas A&M to beat Auburn.
Well, I think it's a couple of factors. You know, I try to put in some data and throw it into the machine and crunch numbers and look at a couple things, and it really does not equate to Texas A&M beating Auburn. The first thing you look at is where the game's being played.
Yes.
It's being played in Auburn. So I think that there's an advantage there. Let's look at what Texas A&M did last year comparatively to what Auburn did last year. Texas A&M went 7-6. Auburn went 6-7. Okay. All right. Well, that's not a very much of a differentiator, but especially that you're playing in Auburn. So I thought, well, maybe Texas A&M had a significantly better recruiting class coming in this year that would make the difference. No, Texas A&M was 17th in the country in ranking. Auburn was 10th. So when you take all those factors, the only thing that I can come up with is the quarterback position.
Quarterback. That's right.
I truly believe they think Weigman is that superior to Peyton Thorne, and therefore they're giving them the nod even on the road. But I will say this. You know how I always talk about, as a joke, we talk about the Bama bump in recruiting? Texas A&M seems to be one of those programs historically that always gets the benefit of the doubt before the season starts.
Yeah.
Like they get too much love, unjustified, overrated love. They're ranked 20th in the country in that preseason poll. How? Why? I'm just not seeing it. And maybe they feel like this recruiting class that was so great 2 or 3 years ago, Elko will be able to do something with that Fisher did not. But I'm just not, I can't compute it. I can't get there. I don't know what they're looking at.
A big reason why A&M was able to stay in so many games last year was because of their defense. They had a really good defense. But a big chunk of their defense's production was Walter Nolan, who's no longer there. He's transferred to Ole Miss, and obviously Auburn doesn't play Ole Miss this year. But to me, there's just a lot of change. Now, I do think A&M will be better at the end of the year when they play Auburn than the start of the year because they've got a new coaching staff. And, you know, another thing that made their defense really good, you know, that guy is leading Auburn's defense now.
Exactly.
DJ Durkin. And I just think emotionally, he'd probably never admit it. Like, you know, this game's going to mean something to DJ Durkin. I think that's going to be an underlying storyline going into that weekend for sure. But yeah, I've just been surprised by it. Like, would I rather have Conner Weigman right now than Peyton Thorne? I think so. But I think I'd rather have Auburn's offensive line. I'd rather have Auburn's defensive line. I'd rather have Auburn's defensive backs, especially after the injury A&M just went through in the running back room. I'd definitely take Auburn's running back room. I just think from a roster to roster standpoint, like maybe A&M has more depth than I realize, but in the positions that matter, in the trenches and positions that impact the passing game outside of the quarterback, I like Auburn's roster better. And I mean, it's what you led with. It's at Jordan-Hare Stadium.
I'm going to push back on something you said that's very interesting, that you said something about when they're playing this game, because I was talking to somebody about this game that's an Alabama fan, and I was just kind of saying, you know, I don't understand why A&M is getting so much love.
Yeah.
He said, when is this game being played? And I said, November. And his comment was, oh, by November, A&M will be toast. Traditionally, by November, except that one year, they fizzle out. And that's a great
new era. Like, was that a Jimbo Fisher thing? They've got Mike Elko now, or is that just culturally who they are? I mean, that's a good question.
Yeah. And so, with someone, it was different. I mean, they didn't, I mean, when they got really, really bad, they were done by the time Columbus Day came around. But so if you look at it that way, what will Elko, what will he enforce? What will he imprint with his type of coaching? Maybe, as you said, now if A&M gets better throughout the year and improves and progresses, then I can see maybe why that makes sense. It does. But just looking at factors and data right now, I mean, let's be honest. A&M won 7 games. Auburn won 6. One of those games A&M won was in College Station, and Auburn had an awful offensive game. So, yeah, A&M won that game. But Auburn should have been and could have easily been 8-4 and had a better record than Texas A&M. I don't think that Texas A&M lost games they should have won, kind of like Auburn did. And, again, the recruiting class thing. I really wanted to see how they came into this year with recruiting momentum. I think it comes back to that's how much emphasis people put on the quarterback position, because as you
matters
position groups like you just did, I mean, I agree 100%. Running back, the defensive, the linebackers, the secondary, that kind of thing. So, and I mean, let's be honest, Zach, if you go into a game head to head in a football game and you're taking both coaches on the sidelines, would you rather have Hugh Freeze or Mike Elko? I get it that Mike Elko did a good job at Duke. But who's the more seasoned, experienced, who's had more games under his belt in the SEC? Freeze. So there should be a coaching advantage there as well.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know, like, is Conner Weigman appropriately ranked, like, as far as SEC quarterbacks go? I mean, nothing against the guy. Like, I think he's fine. I think he's a fine quarterback. But it's not like he's played that many games. He played in half of the season in 22. And then last year against Auburn, like, he got hurt. And so it's not like he's played a ton of football, and his stats are fine. I don't know, man. Sometimes I just kind of wonder if collectively we hype certain people up. And I'm guilty of that. Darrell, I'm sure you'd admit to being guilty of that at some point. I don't know. But Conner Weigman, to me, I think he's solid. I don't think he's some like elite quarterback that changes an offense all because of him. Am I being too hard on him?
No, and I think the question is whether it's valid or not. And I know that Jimbo Fisher got the reputation of being kind of a quarterback developer, quarterback whisperer. I don't know if that reputation is warranted because he's had some fizzle out over the years after having Jameis Winston. It kind of died. So if that adage is true,
sure,
and if Jimbo Fisher is good for quarterbacks, then why didn't Weigman flourish like he should have other than getting hurt? Or is the Jimbo Fisher narrative completely overhyped and he doesn't develop quarterbacks, and maybe Weigman does get better out from underneath the Fisher umbrella? We shall see. I think Weigman's a good quarterback, like you said, solid.
I think he's solid. Yeah.
I don't think he's a top 4 quarterback in the SEC. And so where is this love that they're going to go on the road at night or whatever, on the road and beat Auburn when Auburn should be better, deeper, better coached? I mean, and playing at home. I don't know. I don't get it. I think it's traditionally a program that gets too much love, and it's based upon the fact that they're even ranked. I mean, that's 7-6, and they put them in the top 20. Why?
Yeah,
wow,
yeah,
I'm not
and
seeing it.
They lost so many of their top players. It's wild to me.
And Elko's not like, I mean, they didn't go get a coach, like when LSU got Brian Kelly from Notre Dame, right? I get that. Elko was at Duke, and he did some nice things at Duke, but it wasn't anything near
this time
Lincoln
of year
Riley.
Ago.
Yeah,
this time of year ago,
Oklahoma.
the average Texas A&M fan a year ago did not know who Mike Elko was.
No. You're not talking about Lincoln Riley going from Oklahoma to USC or Brian Kelly going from Notre Dame to LSU. This is a different type of coaching move. And so, I'm not getting it. We'll see, but I just don't see it. I really don't.
I'm there with you. I'm there with you. Auburn's running back room has been a major discussion point this offseason. If Auburn has the same rushing attack as they did a year ago, does Auburn have a 1,000-yard rusher? And what does the RB2 and RB3 situation look like? We take a stab at it in just a moment, right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Darrell, can you imagine wagering anywhere other than our friends at FanDuel?
Well, there you go. Take that A&M Auburn game. If what the pundits are saying, Auburn will be a home underdog in that game, right? So that would be a fun one to kind of look at.
I think so. And look, I mean, that's the hottest thing on right now at FanDuel, but they've got new deals and bonuses for everyone every single day over at FanDuel.com. Of course, Major League Baseball is in full swing, pun intended there, but yeah, go and check out some of their futures for Auburn football. Still 7.5 wins. We've been saying it for weeks. Like, that is just a steal in my mind. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball and the Locked On Podcast Network. Darrell, today's show is also brought to you by our friends at Home Field Apparel. You know, obviously, Home Field is a premium college sports brand. Before they even came on the show, you and I both have bought several. We've bought several of Home Field shirts, and we love the quality. We love the designs. It's a great product and a great brand.
It's such throwback items and retro items.
Yeah.
And, you know, the Home Field box, football box, they've released it, the Auburn contents. It's pretty good. People need to go check it out. Pretty cool apparel.
Yeah. They've got their Can't Miss Kickoff 2024 campaign going on, and a big part of that is their football boxes. So they're gearing up fans for the entire 2024 season. They've got the football box. They've got 3 never-before-seen items for your school that are not available anywhere else, and they're also curated so fans have new gear to wear anytime they go out, you know, with their sporting event, whether you're going to games or watch parties or whatever it may be. So head over to the Home Field website. That's at homefieldapparel.com. And they've got, of course, Auburn stuff as well as pretty much any college you can think of. They've got you covered. That's going to be over at homefieldapparel.com. Thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. For your second listen, check out our friends at Locked On SEC or even Locked On College Football. But Darrell, when you look at what Auburn did running the ball a year ago, Auburn as a team ran for 2,457, so 2,457 yards on the ground. And to me, when you think about, okay, what does the rushing attack look like? Jarquez went for 909, that was the leading rusher. Peyton Thorne was second with 515. Damari had 320. Brian Batty had 227. And then Robbie Ashford was the other rusher that rushed for over 200. He had 217. So to me, let's assume Auburn rushes for the same amount, which was an effective rushing attack. They were 4th in the conference in rushing yards last season. And I think that's about right. I think if you add to your offense the way we think the passing attack is going to go, we think it's going to go much better than a year ago. It was literally last in the conference last season. I don't think they'll be last this year. If they are last in the conference in passing, there's some questions that we got to ask. But let's assume they rush for 2,400 again. I think Jarquez gets 1,000. How do you think the other chips fall?
Well, I think that Auburn will definitely get to the 2,600 yard mark for that. And I believe Hunter gets 1,100. I think he goes over 1,000. He gets about 1,100. I could see Damari Alston getting about 600. I could see Cobb increasing his totals to about 500. And then that leaves you about 300 yards left, and I think Peyton Thorne will get those. I think Peyton Thorne will not rush for as many yards as he did last year, but he will still be effective running the ball. I just think he won't have to because he'll be a little bit more effective throwing the ball, and Auburn will have a lot more yards in the air. So that's how I see it breaking down, like 1,100 for Hunter, 600 for Alston, 500 for Cobb, and then the rest being Thorne.
I mean, that would be tremendous balance if that was the case. That would be tremendous balance. I mean, how does Sean Jackson fit into this, you think? Last year he had 6 carries for 95 yards. Do you think he breaks 100 this year?
He might get, obviously, some of the Battie carries late that Battie's not going to get. So I could see him getting into the mix maybe for about 150 to 180 yards total, maybe doubling what his rush total was.
What was our Sean Jackson bet last year?
You want it?
I know. I just
said
really
that he
wanted
would
you to say
get,
that again.
I thought he was going to get 200 yards. Is that what I said? Yeah, I said he was going to get 200 yards, and he did not. So, yeah, you want it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just making sure.
Yeah.
that was out there. The Peyton, Thorne, and Robbie Ashford, of course, Robbie's not on the team anymore, but like the quarterback running dynamic was so interesting a year ago. I'm curious to see how much of that is a part of the offensive game plan. Like, I'm all for Peyton Thorne scrambling. I would like to see less design runs just because you have so many other playmakers. And like Peyton Thorne was an effective rusher a year ago, deceivingly. But to me, it's like I'd rather him hand the ball off to Jarquez or Jeremiah or Damari, or throw a short pass to Cam Coleman or Perry or, KLS. The list goes on and on. It's also going to be interesting because I think there's a lot of things at play here. One, Auburn's going to have more offensive snaps this season because they were so bad on third down. There's no way they're worse. There's just no way. There's no way. There is. It's going to be a long year. And then also, they're going to feel so much more confident and comfortable throwing the football. And so are there going to be games where they would run it less than they would a year ago because they have a passing attack now, we think. So there's a lot of variables here, but even the volume of rushes could go down and the production could still be the same, which is ideal, right? Like that's what you want to happen, is you run it less and still like have the same amount of yards or close to it. I think that's a realistic possibility. But Darrell, you and I were joking a second ago before we clicked record on like how bad Auburn was passing. And it's like, okay, well, if they could do like a true 50-50 thing where they ran it for 2,400 and then passed it for 2,400, Auburn would still, if that was the case, in total offense, they'd still only be like, I'm doing the quick math here, seventh in the SEC in last year's SEC. So I would assume Texas would be ahead of them. Maybe Oklahoma, we'll see. But you'd be in that middle of the pack offensively if your passing game was as productive as your rushing game was.
Yeah, a lot to unpack. First of all, to your first point, I think you're spot on that Peyton Thorne will not have to run as much as he did last year. That's why I think his numbers will drop. But when he does run, it will be a lot more effective because it'll be either the element of surprise, or it'll be the third option behind throwing the ball or handing the ball off to your running backs. That should give you a little bit more production. And then to your second point, that you may run it less but have bigger production, would be all based upon having an effective passing attack. As you know, if you can throw the ball like that and people don't have to pin their ears back and sell out to stop the run, you should still have some space downfield, green grass, in between tackles to run the ball. So you may not have as many rushes, but you'll have bigger chunk plays. So your excellent point on both of those. To your third point, we've said all along that if Auburn can just get good, just decent is an adjective for an offensive output, meaning get into the top half of the SEC, that we would think that would translate into a couple more wins. Yeah. So this goes this really lines up to everything we're talking about all offseason. Auburn gets more balance, throws it for 2,300 yards, rushes it for 2,500 yards, gets into the top half of the SEC. And nothing we're talking about is earth-shattering, pie in the sky. Oh, my God, what 100% flip that they have to do. It's
we're asking them to keep the same rushing attack and have an SEC average passing game. That's all we're asking for.
It's very doable. It's very realistic. And I think with what they've brought in from a weapon standpoint, it'll happen. And if we look up at the end of the year, Zach, and Auburn is 7th, let's just say overall in the SEC in total offense, they will win 9 games. Period. If the defense isn't horrible, and there's no way we think the defense will be bad. So
they were 10th in total offense a year ago with no Texas and Oklahoma. Texas and Oklahoma, I know Texas did. I'm assuming Oklahoma's offense was better than a year ago. Yeah. So you would be 12th in total offense by last year's standards. You had the 4th best rushing attack, which is obviously great. But I think we forget how bad Auburn's passing game was last year. I mean, it was just absolutely atrocious. Last in the league, 2,100 yards. You're averaging 162 passing yards a game. I mean, that's wild. I mean, the top teams in the conference, you'd see them get that in a quarter in some games.
Yeah.
It's just insane. And you look at like some of the teams that are ahead of you, and it's like, I just don't think their setup is that much better. I mean, think about how bad Arkansas was last year. They couldn't move the ball at anybody, and they threw for more yards a game than Auburn. It's just
obviously because of Jefferson. But think about this.
Still, it's not like he was super productive, though.
No. All we're asking Auburn to do is throw for 38 more yards a game to get to 2,500 yards. That's the math. 38 more yards per game times 12 games to get to 2,500 yards, which sounds like a nice round number. If you do that, now I get it. Some of those yards in the air last year were Robbie Ashford. He did throw the ball some and come in and get some yards. Sure. But at the end of the day, I can't see how Auburn doesn't do that just by default. I mean, it's going to happen. With the receivers that Auburn has, Auburn will throw for 2,500 yards. And the key is maintaining that rushing production. And when that happens, if you finish 8th or 7th in the SEC, which is in the top half, I'm telling you, and your defense plays sound and plays solid, that's where you'll see that improvement. Now, if you way overachieve and you really, really do some things that are unprecedented and completely shock the nation and get 10, 11, then you're going to have to see that really go up. But if it does, then that could happen. But I just think for being realistic and for trying to stay, absolutely with their feet on the ground, just be 50-50, get into the top half of the SEC, and you'll see what that'll do for win total.
Yeah, I with the way the defense is expected to perform this year, you got a shot against anybody. And just to be clear, 1, 2, 3, 4, only 5 teams in the SEC did not throw for 3,000 yards last year. And Auburn was 900 away from that. I mean, that's just it's just so bad.
Woo,
it's so bad. And so I think Auburn's going to be closer to 3,000. They could pass for 3,000 as a team. We'll see. If they do that, then.
Could you imagine?
No.
I'm not going to say, can you imagine? This one changes a little bit. Could you imagine if Auburn threw for 3 bills and rushed for 2,500 still? Now you're talking about, as long as your defense, again, as long as that doesn't equate to your defense is giving up 30 points a game and you're having to win in shootouts, that could be very, very solid as far as what you could be. You could be talking about.
But still, like if they did that, Darrell, in last year's SEC, they'd be 7th in total offense. So once again, we're not saying anything groundbreaking here.
We're not really going pie in the sky. No,
we're asking for an average modern college football offense.
Yes, so, there you go.
For folks that are thinking we're wishing for too much, it's like we're asking for just like
take the leather helmets off, put on real big boy helmets. Let's go. Modern day football.
That's right. Hey, did Peyton Thorne, did he finally get some recognition and does it mean anything? Maybe. That's coming up right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Game Time is the best place to buy tickets, Darrell. I mean, can you imagine buying tickets anywhere else?
I just bought some for the Texas Rangers and Minnesota Twins. And
really?
So you're going to a game. And so I bought some for that last minute lightning deal.
Well, let me ask you a few questions about that.
Okay.
Did it take a long time to buy those tickets?
3 minutes.
Did you feel like you overspent for those tickets?
Not when I clicked on the little lightning bolt, I didn't.
No way. But like, you probably don't know what the view looks like from your seat, right?
Oh yeah, I do. Absolutely. It's not just because you and I have been to this stadium before.
That's true.
The view, by the way, the view that I'm going to see is a lot better than the one we saw.
It's a lot better. Yeah.
but yeah, it's I mean, all of those things. And then it goes right into your MLB app where you transfer the tickets and you're ready to roll. It's really big time.
Yeah, take the guesswork out of buying tickets, MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Peyton Thorne was named to the watch list for the Johnny Unitas Golden Arm Award, which is cool. Auburn put out a great graphic. It looked great. It's like, cool, Peyton Thorne's getting some love and some recognition. In fact, you texted me about it. Like, sweet, this is great.
Yeah.
And so for those who don't know, because I didn't know, the Johnny Unitas Golden Arm Award, it's a quarterback award that's given to quarterbacks that are going to graduate with their team this year, upperclassmen award. So a lot of these guys have been in college football for a long time. So like your Drew Aller of Penn State, your Carson Beck of Georgia, Quinn Ewers of Texas, like your big names are in here. But then you look and it's like, oh, TJ Finley's on here too.
I got to admit, full disclosure, I was so excited when I saw the graphic come out because I thought, finally, Peyton Thorne's getting a little bit of national recognition. And I looked at the last previous winners, guys like Eli Manning and Andrew Luck. And Zach, God bless you. You brought me back down to earth. You gave me a reality check when you mentioned Nate Yarnell,
from
TJ Finley, and some other guys. Not to knock them, but it's almost like by default everybody's on this list, right? It just is.
The first one I saw was Tyler Van Dyke of Wisconsin. I'm like,
yeah, it's
all right.
I mean, I get it. At least he's named and he's on a watch list. So pray, hallelujah. There's a little bit of notoriety and recognition there. But when you do a deep dive, I'm surprised you and I aren't on the list. Let's just.
Yeah, it's only because we're quarterbacks and not graduating this year.
Yes, I guess. But I mean, I'm not trying to. The award in itself is very prestigious when you win it. I mean, it is.
Sure. Yeah, I mean,
it's got leadership aspects. It's off the field, and again, if you look at the past winners, it's a who's who. Joe Burrow won it. I mean, there's just some guys that are big time players that have won it. But the watch list is definitely all encompassing. That's the best way I could describe it. They cast out a rather large net. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, but Thorne's on there, and I hope he wins the dang thing.
Yeah,
Let's go.
He got some love and some national recognition. And you think about this. I want to go back to our previous segment of something we have not talked about. There was a graphic that got put out a couple days ago by somebody predicting the top quarterbacks in the SEC. And they also put next to it what their projected yards would be. And Peyton Thorne wasn't even in the graphic.
Oh, right.
They cut it off at 12.
Yeah.
And I'm going, if I'm Thorne, I print that out, I stick it on my mirror. And when I shave and brush my teeth every morning, I look at that and I use that as motivation. Yeah. But so, I mean, after seeing that, I got pretty hyped that he was on a watch list, but I get it. Just use it for fuel. Use it for fuel.
It's amazing how fluid all these quarterbacks are with where they were. Like, we played the game beforehand. I was like, do you know where TJ Finley is now? Because, like, I thought he was still at Texas State. But TJ Finley, like, he's at West Virginia now, which is kind of wild.
Western Kentucky.
Yep, Western Kentucky. Thank you for correcting me on that. Yeah, right. I'm looking right at it, and I can't remember it. But it's just wild, like, how many of these guys are transfers and were somewhere else not that long ago. Like Luke Altmaier. You know where he is now?
I do not know.
Yeah, he's in Illinois, apparently. Like, huh?
He was at Ole Miss, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
And LSU, right?
Nussmeier is LSU.
That's who I'm thinking of.
Yeah, so Altmaier, Nussmeier, the Meyer boys. Yeah.
I don't know. It's just kind of wild to see. Like, most people's quarterback, like, they got from somewhere else. Like Will Howard is on here. I don't know. It's kind of interesting to me. Darrell, how can people check out everything you've got going on?
Follow me on X, DAP6410, Darrell Dapp on Instagram, and Wednesdays and Fridays here with you. And come hang out at the barn. That's a fun place, a great community, message board. We all have a good time.
Yeah, the barnauburn.com. We're there. Charlie5/Kyle Rush is there. Come hang out for sure. The barnauburn.com. Hey, like the video. Please subscribe. We'll see you next time. This has been Locked On Auburn.